listening to Sports and Courts Radio with John Phillips on 1010XL.
You get along a lot better with all kinds of folks. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view. Until you climb inside of his skin, walk around in it.
Okay, call in at 641-1010 if you can identify who that was in that clip. And I've got a very fancy wine opener for you. That's one of my favorite clips from one of my favorite movies of all time. And if you can identify who it is, call the studio, 641-1010, and I've got a very, very nice wine opener. I'm so happy to have my next guest on, Dr. Glen House. Dr. House is the medical director for the Center for Neurological and Trauma Rehab at Penrose Hospital in Colorado Springs. He is, I could spend his entire allotment of time talking about all the stuff that he's done, but I'm going to let him speak to yourself. I mean, this is truly a pleasure for me. Good morning, Dr. House. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
You bet.
Because we do, I'm a personal injury attorney by training, also a sports agent, but I do we handle traumatic cases, brain injury cases, and then I've dealt with it obviously from the sports concussion side, and saw your resume and have heard you speak for some time, and this is my actually third show for Sports and Courts, and I was just like, man, this guy, we got to get him. He is ideal, and your views on NCAA and NFL concussion prevention are right with mine, and I want everybody in the world to listen to what you have to say. Tell us about yourself, please.
Well, just real quick, I when I was 20 years old, a junior in college, I planned on going into dental school and being an oral surgeon. I was snow skiing, doing some extreme skiing in Snowbird, Utah, and broke my neck. I broke the 7th vertebrae in my neck. That left me a complete, what they call C7 quadriplegic, which basically I have use of my arms like a paraplegic, nothing below the chest, but limited dexterity, so I can't button my shirt, tie my shoes. So obviously I couldn't go to dental school. I switched and went to medical school at the University of Washington. I did a residency in physical medicine rehabilitation at the Baylor UT program down in Houston, and then a spinal cord injury fellowship at the Kessler Institute out in New Jersey. That's it. Now I'm in Colorado Springs.
That's fantastic. You also, and I may have missed it, you also got an MBA along the way, didn't you?
I did, yeah, just recently, actually, at the University of Colorado.
You're my most credentialed guest ever. No, it's fantastic, and you've got quite an online enterprise for people that have been in traumatic injuries in their families. Tell us about that.
Well, right now, I did an interview probably a year ago on healthradio.net. So it's an online internet health station, and what I added to that was a section on disabilities or even sometimes prevention of disabilities, and that is called Living with and Beyond Disability. And so it's live every Tuesday at 2 Eastern Time, 2 to 3. We have amazing guests. We have really super experts that are doing studies, that are setting guidelines. We talk about stuff like travel with accessibility. We talk this week, actually Tuesday, we're going to be talking to a neuropsychologist specifically on concussions and brain injury and go into depth on the new law in Colorado and the tests that should be done and some things I can talk about now.
Phenomenal. Let's break it down for the average Joe in Jane about what the difference is between a head injury and a concussion.
Okay, and that's probably the most important part of this whole discussion, and that is we used to just refer to, when someone gets hit, they got cobwebs, they're a little fuzzy, they're on the sidelines, kind of showing them kind of stumbling, looking for their helmet, that sort of thing, and kind of laughing it off, and they'll be back in a little while. Well, what we understand now, and it should be understood, is that a concussion is truly a form of brain injury. It's a mild traumatic brain injury. And we shouldn't take it that lightly and just that they need to clear it off and go back in. In fact, what's very important is something called second impact syndrome, which means if you have a concussion and you go back in too early, then, and you're playing when you're not clear, and you have another hit that's similar, you will have a catastrophic and rapid swelling of the brain that can lead to death or very, very severe disability. And
that's what happened to that LaSalle kid. Are you familiar with that case?
I am not.
There was a kid at LaSalle that got knocked out, and I'm having a hard time coming up with his name, but he got knocked out, went back in a couple of games later, and LaSalle University actually no longer has a football program and settled his lawsuit for $7.5 million. But the kid went through all the rehab, which we're going to get into, and I mean it's
and I think that's a good example, just because it's I think you can go to every single state and everyone can give you an example. In fact, the law that was recently passed in Colorado this March is referred to as the Jake Snakenberg law, after a kid in high school who had a head injury during a football, and he went home, came back for 2 days, actually just playing 2 days, and died. And and that's not, they don't all die. I mean, sometimes it's just very severe disability. I take care of brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, stroke patients. I just took over 2 weeks ago. I had a new patient come in that is living in a group home for brain injuries, and he's 20 years old, and it happened 2 years ago when he was playing football.
Wow. Preston Plaverdes is his name, and he was featured on ESPN 60, and I'll shoot you a clip of that if you want it. And at the end, he's starting to get his speech back. It's slow but sure. But the one thing that he wanted everybody to know, he speaks on head injury prevention and concussions and all of that. And the one thing that he wanted everybody to know was about about being brave enough to sit out. It's not about being brave enough to come back in the game, which is what everybody says. It's being brave enough to sit out and let your brain heal. And he said that he wishes he had, he wishes he could have sat out just one or two more games, and now he's essentially sitting out life. And of course, the tears started streaming.
And that's an incredible point, because when I was, my dad played for University of Texas, back in the late 50s, early 60s. At that time, and he had commented before, no one even thought about that. And even when I was in high school, which I graduated in the late 80s, I had about 5 concussions from 8th grade to my junior year. And, the coaches were just kind of like, let's get him a better helmet. And I saw a neurologist, and, they said, look, if you keep doing this, you're going to be a punch drunk. You're going to develop something called pugilistic dementia. And, I quit. And it was probably the best decision. I wasn't going to be a pro football player, and I quit and said, I need to focus on something else. And, I'm not saying quit. I mean, I absolutely love football. I'm a huge, huge fan of football. So, but there is something. Why is the question? I guess is, why do some people get head injuries and some people have the same hit and even harder and don't? And we don't know that answer. I don't think. And the guy that I'm interviewing this week is going to address that a little bit, but his suspicion is that we'll end up finding out that there's maybe some genetic component. There's something to where the same hit with the same person on the same day, one gets a head injury and the other one doesn't. But so I think the awareness needs to be, if you're having, first of all, come out of the game, be very well healed, but if you're having head injury after head injury, it's probably not going to stop. And the long-term outcome, even if you don't end up with either dead or with a severe brain injury, can also, there's some question about whether this leads to long-term dementia. So there's some studies that have shown that, this is looking a lot like, autopsies are looking a lot like somebody with Alzheimer's disease without the plaques that we would normally see. So very similar but different.
Right, the CTE stuff, which I've written about and studied. One of my good friends, Kevin Turner, was a fullback for Alabama, and he ultimately played for the Eagles and the Patriots. And he was recently diagnosed with ALS. And I said, man, take a second look. It's probably CTE, and because that's it's those little lesions that hit after hit that just causes it. And you saw last year, we all saw Emmitt Smith get on the stage and cry because of thanking Moose Johnson for being his fullback and taking all those hits for him that made him get up there and be a Hall of Famer. Yeah. And here's Moose, who's going through some dementia stuff, and early onset of Alzheimer's and that link, and dealing with, Moose isn't, but some of the other fullbacks in the league are dealing with the CTE, and it was linked to Dave Duerson's suicide with Chicago and everything else. I mean, this is serious stuff, and it's just now that the medical science is kind of catching up and invading the NFL enough that we're getting their attention. But I think you and I both feel that there's still not enough attention being paid to it. Correct?
Yeah,